My name is Yuval, as Lorena said. I'm the head of the server infrastructure groups and also manage the Wix Server Guild, part of the Guild server management. And we came today to talk about platform engineering, which is, I'll say the form of the description, the discipline of designing and building tool chains and workflows that enable fast service capabilities for software engineering organizations, which basically means that we are responsible for everything that happens from the moment an engineer knows what he wants to do until it appears in production, right? And there's a lot of interest in this field today because I think that in the last 3-4 years, companies during COVID grew significantly, and just to find out that the velocity dropped. So they recruited more people and the experience also dropped. And when you usually use the term platform engineering, you find that companies use it to describe production management and CI/CD pipelines. And we discovered, and this is the topic of a discussion, that you can apply the same techniques to improve the efficiency of business logic, of writing business logic. We are Wix. I'll say a few slides about Wix, and we are often perceived as a website building company, right? And this is true, but a few years back we expanded the mission, and right now our mission is to create solutions for all of the business requirements or online business needs of our customers. Now our customers can be individuals, they can be public companies, they can be from yoga teachers to hotel networks. And the realm of online presence needs is also wide because wide part of our life is online now. And it can be from site building, logo maker, campaign shoutouts, SEO, whatever they need. And it's either stuff that we build or customers build and then upload it to our app store, which is also possible. And regarding our size, so we are 1,500 engineers, geographically distributed between Europe, Ukraine, Israel, and America. And one last slide with numbers, we have 240 million registered users. Out of them, more than 6 million are premium subscriptions. We have more than 3,000 now deployed service in production and around 1,000 Lambda services. Velocity-wise, so we have 7,000 merges per day with more than 50,000 builds per day running on distributed cloud. And on a daily basis, we have more than 600 deployments per day, and during work hours, it's more than 1 minute. So basically, it's like the saying that you can't enter the same river twice. Every time you visit a Wix site, you see a different system. Okay, so we'll start with our take on development. We believe that we need to iterate as we scale. It means that even if we did something which was amazing at one point, then due to our growth, we will need to find better ways to improve it, right? And the last one is that we as an infrastructure group need to always look at the business direction and find solution to it. And I want to illustrate these 3 concepts with 2 major shifts in mindset that we did in our history. The first one is around 2014, we were already well invested in microservices. I'm skipping the shift from monolith to microservice because there's a lot of information online in this area. But in brief, when you move to microservices, you need a whole lot of infrastructure. So around 2014, I think, we already had like dozens of microservices. And we starting to feel that our velocity drops, meaning that every task takes longer. And the first immediate place where you feel it, usually when you work on microservices, is in the integration environment, right? And why? Because integration environment is a product by itself, and you are running fast, and you develop features in a fast pace. And the second thing is that in the integration environment is where all your dependencies are met. So we feel the noise mainly in the integration environment. And we understand that if we're going to do the same thing that we know to do, which means adding more infrastructure and more solution, probably the velocity is not going to change significantly. So we sit together, and what we decide to do is delete the integration environment, right? And the first thing that happens is, the first outcome is silence, because we delete with it the Slack channel of the integration environment, and nobody comes to talk to us. The second outcome is that velocity rises up again. right? And features start flowing to production quicker. So no staging environment as well, because we removed the integration environment. And at that time, we had a lot of traffic and a lot of users, and we needed to introduce some new orderly work method that will replace what we had so far. So what did we introduce? First thing we introduced is TDD for high code coverage, not as a goal, as a culture. And with it, A/B testing system. Now every engineer writes his service and a test kit and covers it with contact test, and nobody has to integrate in the integration environment. And we had gradual rollout capabilities, and we get some kind of very safe gradual rollout system or orderly method. And I like this iteration. Wait, I'll go back. I like this iteration because first, it's out of the box thinking, right? And the second is that it wasn't trendy at all at that time. I mean, there were many companies back then that struggled with integration environment, and many other companies that offer solution for managing the integration environment. And in Wix, we just did something which was completely different. Second mind shift is open platform. So we are around 2017 now, and it still is a cornerstone in our development today, no integration environment, we never looked back. But suddenly the next disruption comes from the business side, right? In 2017, Wix decides to be an open platform system. And it takes us a very long time to understand what it means, right? Because it's pretty abstract. And today I can say that the system now allows to be extended using our architecture, meaning user can write stuff and contribute it to us, and they can make a better tailored solution for them. And if I want to refine it, I have three concepts to refine it now that I understand what it means. So quality is the first one. Now we have, and quality is pretty much, we defined it already. It has metrics like uptime of a system, error rates, response time. And now there's a new ballpark where we need to apply it on user code that we host, because user can contribute code. However, this is pretty intuitive. Why? Because we know the definition of the product. We know what we need to do. Just apply it on user code that we host. The second one is uniformity. And at the most basic level, it means standard APIs, right? So if you have /query here, you should have it in another. We want people to be able to move from working with one product, like booking, and shifting to another product without reading through a lot of docs. So if we succeed in uniformity, then our customers' velocity will start going up. And it's not only the structure of the URL, it's also the feature. So if you have your ability to connect webhooks or multilingual, you should be able to get it in another API of the system. We are trying to avoid the Conway law, where we want people to see the system as if it was built by one single team. And the third one is the most interesting one. It's extensibility. It means that we leave a lot of extension points to be able to upgrade our product. And it means that we can have webhooks, and we are able to provide the ability to add custom data to each service. And what else? SPI, being able to replace components in the system. So every API that we have has a lot of extension points around it. So now we understand that this is an open platform. And back at that time, we decided to do some kind of an experiment, an exercise. We tried to understand the experience that we as an infrastructure group are providing to our clients. So what we did is that we tried to understand what it is like to write one single microservice at Wix that adheres all the concept that we talked about for open platforms. So this is Dana. She's an engineer in Wix. She joined about 4 months ago, and she did our onboarding. And she got some tasks to fix stuff in production. She dropped production, and now she's ready to get a domain. And for this exercise, what we did, we actually did it, by the way. We will choose a domain which is simple enough. We chose a wish list. We try to write wish list as a microservice for an open platform. Now, wish list is very simple. It's just a CRUD-like service that helps you manage list of products. Now, if you do it for open platform, then other people can extend it, and I'll give you an example, which is very common. Someone can write an application that finds products which are very popular on wish lists, and also potential buyers are very sensitive to price changes. So we can write an app that finds them and suggests them for promotions, right? But Dana, in this exercise, doesn't have to deal with it. She needs to deal only with the CRUD, simple CRUD service in the domain of wish list. So if I were her, I would probably start with understanding the domain modeling, which means in this idea, in this scope, it's very simple. It's the name of the service and the attributes. Other attributes that user will add is not a problem. She created a simple microservice. And API design, which API she exposes. And this is pretty trivial also. It's a CRUD-like, but she will need to be familiar with some canonical other service and be aligned with them. Other topics, and I'll follow. I think it's easy to follow the request flow of one single request to understand what she has to deal with. So the next thing is authentication and authorization. She needs to verify before she reaches business logic that this is the user, he's permitted, and he is able to see the data that he wants. It's 3 different questions, right? After that, input validation, meaning min value, max value. Email is valid in a standard way. Object mapping. Now, object mapping is pretty common in web services, meaning that we represent the level of data in 2 different layers because it has different life cycles, and we don't want to leak abstraction between the layers. Then we have RPC. Let's say she needs to validate that the ID is of a real product, so she will need to request another service, and probably she will need a secret, and she will have to learn how to get it from a Vault or Kubernetes. And data access. Now, this is a wide subject because data modeling is highly related to the company you work for and the product you are trying to build. So here in Wix, we have our read-write pattern is heavily biased toward reads. We have a large scale. We want very fast response time because we care about SEO. So we denormalize data. We don't use joins. We don't use traduction. We have a lot of concepts. You will have to learn it. And domain events, meaning that in order for somebody else to write a service on top of her solution, she will have to notify the world that she did everything that has a side effect. So sending domain events over Kafka or over any other broker. Last one is error handling, and this is very important because our users now are engineers and they want to know everything and in a standard way. Now we call it the anatomy of a microservice, everything that you have to go through. And Dana, she's a smart engineer. She knows a lot. She studied everything. And after a few weeks, she comes to us and says, I think I'm ready to start. And we tell her, not yet, not quite, because there's academic code, and then there's real-life code. And in real life, you have laws and lawyers, and you have GDPR. She will need to generate endpoints that will allow the user to request data, delete data, encrypt data. And when she encrypts the data, she will complicate the query and the semantic search and the advanced search, and she'll find it out. And then caching. It's also an interesting topic. We have a metric in Wix, cost per request, and she can improve the metrics if she routes the request outside of the service. And then schedule task, BI, login, testing strategy. However, she's strong, a bit tired, but strong, and she says, I think I got it handled. I have what it takes. And we tell her, not yet, not quite, because we didn't speak yet about scaffolding and building and deployment and testing. And there's a big topic called production ownership, right? How to manage your service in production. So that's a lot. And while we wrote it with her, we understood the amount of cognitive load it takes and the liability of each one of these concepts. So at this time, I'm talking about prior to 2017, a few years back, we had some libraries, and we decided to write a framework. And a framework is a more opinionated solution. It composes everything with you, for you. And we wrote documentation, and I think it was a great documentation. It was focused on recipes, and it had many examples, right? But then suddenly, one area became more complex, which is identity management, right? Because now we had agencies and we had different identity like applications. And so what did we do? We wrote another doc, which was also great. And this worked for us, So we had to write some other docs on visibility, managing in production, managing service in production, webhooks and GDPR. And then we wrote some other docs. And finally, this really worked for us, so we wrote some more docs. And basically, as you can see, it's now very trivial to write one microservice in Wix. Yeah. And I'm limited by the number of animated GIFs because there were more. We counted there were more than 400 pages to read in order to write one standard microservice. And we understood at this point that if we keep on doing what we know to do again at this point, then nothing is going to change dramatically. So we need to do another change in mindset, right? Because every time that we create another document, we don't pay attention to the liability. Right? So we had a large organization and the DNA wasn't right for this kind of challenge. And every time a new documentation was added, it wasn't like it was added to a tailored, structured onboarding experience. It usually felt for the engineer a little bit like this, right? And this situation that we were in before we did our next mind shift, right, is called the unplatform. And it has a couple of red flags, right? So for us, the first one was too many docs, and it has the bigger meaner brother, meaning no docs at all, but at the extreme, it's the same, right? Because it's undiscoverable, whatever you need to do, and there are many unmanaged concerns, which causes the services to appear differently to the users, right? So it hurts their velocity. Duplicate solution, which is basically a shame, but also when you have duplicate solution and standard change or regulation changes, or you have problem in production, you have no way out of it, other than asking people nicely in an email. Lots of communication, specifically non-effective communication, right, in the organization, and especially long waits, right? You have to go to the DBA and ask for favors. You have to go to the networking team and ask them to route your data to your service, request to your service. No emergency rollout, and the last one is low productivity. So at this point, we understand that we need a platform, and it's as crucial as moving from libraries to a framework. Now we need to move into a platform. When is a good question that we ask ourselves. So you can do it before. If every challenge that you are going to resolve, you can do it before. You can do it. The right answer would be exactly, but you can do it probably before. Then you risk yourself with you can create premature optimization or solve the wrong problem. And if you do it a little bit after, like we did, then the pain in the organization is concrete and you can easily identify it, right? If you do it way after, then you're in a problem. And this was our day one, right? So this story, I want to tell you a little bit about it. The person in the middle is the CEO of the company, and the other two are engineers in the company. One is an engineer and one engineering manager, right? And 4 years ago, they sent him time estimation for a project they had, right? And the project itself consisted of 12 microservices. And in the estimation, they had a point where it says, CRUD-like service in production. Still doesn't do anything. It's just a CRUD-like to 12 services to release them to production, each one 3 weeks, right? And I think it's an underestimation for open platform microservice. We understood it's a bit different than a regular microservice, but they gave it 3 weeks. And he did what every CEO does. He verified what he's getting and how much he's paying for. Now, how much he's paying for, it's pretty simple. It's 36 weeks, right? 12 microservices. Calendarically, it's a bit more, but this is about the size. And what he gets? Probably nothing. Because he gets 12 microservices that are no different from one another only by the name of the attributes. They still haven't wrote one business logic code, one business value, Wix value. So this was the reason that we started our project. Now, and at this point, right, from this point on, all the roadmaps, yearly roadmaps of the company started with this line. A product company success has direct correlation with the speed of development. If we don't move faster than our competition, we will lose. And we built Nile. Nile is a platform, is an internal development platform. It has solutions for everything that was in the previous, I can go over the slide, but it's everything that we talked about in the open platform microservice, right? It's a major change in mindset, right? Internal development platform, IDP. It's a system that the target is to enable users to focus on delivering real business value. And it's much more than libraries and frameworks, right? It's libraries and frameworks, and it's also tooling, right? because we are responsible for the velocity inside the organization. So we have tools like gRPC console, or we do IntelliSense. Why? Because we are invested in microservice ecosystem, and we want people to prefer it over reference libraries. So we do IntelliSense between we autocomplete RPC calls once we define them, and this also removes a lot of code from production. And it's also, we also do manage CI processes, and a lot of work around guidelines, documentation, and code samples, and production management. And another interesting area is how we do consulting and support, right? Because it's a liability now, it's a responsibility now that we took. We are the civil servant of the organization, so we deal with it a lot. For instance, every product has a Slack channel, and every team has a Slack channel, and we do on-calls around them to make sure that people can run fast when they code. This is the target, right? So this is the why. And regarding the how, a few sentences. Later, Sava and Oded are going to come and show some examples, yes? But regarding the how, so when you decide to build a platform, there are two known techniques to do it. So the first one is called harvesting, where you basically look at static code. It can be a monolith, it could be a list of microservices, and you look for common patterns, right? And you look on how to make it better. And you need two things for that. You need a great engineer that can do this work, and you need some credit from your organization to say, I'm going to solve now problems that you will reap the benefits in a few months from now, right? The downside of it is that you are looking at static code, so you don't know the process. You don't know how much time the engineer waited. You don't know what it took him to get to the data, right? You're looking at static code. The other one, and this is the focus of the rest of the talk, is the foundation platform. It's the ability to say, I know the problem, I'm familiar with it, let me solve it. And there's much higher chances to fail when you build a platform as a foundation platform before you know, before you're familiar with the code. I think the gap really relies on the expectation that we have from an infrastructure engineer, right? So infrastructure engineer, we expect him to be a great engineer, I'll say. Why? Because they often need to pull code from production and debug it with their users and go into the context very, very quick, right? But we also expect them to be able to identify and define the products, right? To prioritize, to have great communication skills, especially written now, work with feedback, which is an art by itself. And because they are responsible for adoption, also do marketing and create some excitement and engagement. And this area, we never filter them on it, and it really belongs not to engineering mainly, it belongs to the product world, right? Because our platform is wide enough that it is a product and engineers are clients, and that's how we see them. We've been doing it for like 4 years now, and we have a very strong DNA on how to do it. And I think we can do it in 3 concepts, right? And we are all familiar with them. The first one is boots on the ground, paving the road, and then measure to improve. And I'll talk in brief about each one of them. So boots on the ground, we do it, it basically means that we have to be as infrastructure engineer in the field a lot, with engineers, pairing with them, okay? And we do that to be able to identify their needs, the product, be able to prioritize, engage with them, and avoid shelfware. Shelfware is something that we had a lot, and it's basically the biggest bankruptcy and an IT organization has, right? It's a software that nobody uses. And often they have wonderful engineering inside them. And during the time that we've been doing it, for so many years, we wrote a guide on how to have boots on the ground. The basic concept of boots on the ground, according to the Nile group. So the first one, and I always start with the first one because this is the most important. If you did this and you succeeded in it, then you probably did a lot of things right. Commit on adoption, meaning that you are not committing to a product, key value store in production. You are committing to 6 users by end of the quarter of your key value store. And this changes everything. It allows the team leader to decide, but make better decisions. Like if you committed for 5, go and pair with them and solve the issue. If you committed for 25, then write great documentation for it. So commit on adoption is the most important one. Other than that, we do a lot of pairing with engineers, either that we send infrastructure engineering to pair, or over the last year, we invited many to write their code in our room for several weeks. And then we get to see our product and our value. Onboarding, everyone onboards in user team. If he comes from another group and joins the info team, he goes for 2 months at least, couple of groups. And if he comes back frustrated, it's good. It's when we ask him what we need to do. And also he creates a lobby. So he can validate his idea later because he creates connection in the companies. Workgroups and advisory board. So we have a product team, which will speak after me, and they have advisory board where they can validate their ideas constantly. And designing with users. So I'll tell you a story from last month. We did our design for a wizard, build a new service. And since we invited users, they always said the pain, they said the proto features are not discoverable. And I think that if we didn't have the user, most of the discussion here would be around regular expression and implementation and not about the real pain, right? So we always design with users. Spotlight session. So this is another idea that we had. It means that every month another team opens users' code and reviews it for 4 hours at least. And then they write up a list of ideas that they have, and they can see if somebody misusing the features or created an abstraction, another infra. It means that we are wrong with our abstraction, and soon they will share their infra and create another infra organization. So we learn a lot by reviewing user code every month. And I think the best task comes from these sessions. Take part in ETA, so we join in major mind switches or mind shifts. We join ETA session, and we see our value again. It's a lot of value for us also, the infrastructure organization. And the last one is treating our platform as an OSS. So we have an OSS tracker with all the rules of open source internally, and people can add tasks and see them going, flowing. They see the team leaders or the product manager taking them, assigning them to boards, and managing communication over them. Second principle, it's going to be pave the road. We learned it from Netflix. We had a lot of mutual discussion with many companies, and they coined the term. We liked it. So we borrowed it, and it means that if the boots on the ground means finding where engineers spend 80% of the time, now it's our commitment to make it nice and cozy. And for this, we also have guidelines on how to do it. So every solution that we release, we look at the amount of cognitive load it adds. When we ask ourselves for each line, does this line should be exposed to the engineer, or maybe you should enable it? Let's say we had a caching solution, and it had like five parameters. Who's going to teach it? Maybe you can work with defaults and let the engineer, once he enables it, have a reference to a document if he wants to change it. Nobody wants to change, by the way, so it's a good option to do to work with defaults. Last one is called No KPI is Perfect. So when we started this project, we had a lot of discussion on how to measure it, because it's very hard as an internal project in the organization to measure success, because the success is usually by proxy. And I became an expert at ruling out every KPI that you bring to the discussion. So I can go for a few examples. Lines of code. It was first suggested. So I can say that if you build your working skeleton in TDD, you'll solve next problem that you will encounter in like 6 months from now. Merge request per day. What is an average size of a request? MTTR, which is a great, by the way, KPI and to work with. It's part of the DORA metrics. It's just at the early stages, it's how to extract tasks from MTTR. And then what we realized is that we need to find the most trivial KPI and evolve inside it until we exhaust it. So we started with lines of code, and we started from 600, and we tried to chop everything, doing it wisely, not doing it with sacrificing user experience to the max, right? And then after it, you can start with, let's say, making sure that your CI cycle is constantly green, right? You can extract tasks like fixing the script and then fixing flaky tests, and only once you feel like you're exhausted, grow to the next KPI. So we constantly evolve the KPIs. Yeah. So it's boots on the ground and pave the road and measure to improve. Last slide before before talking more technical. there's a sentence that I believe in, and most of you know it, right? There's a lot of different phrasing for it, and there's a whole book on this topic. It's called the Mythical Man Month. And I like this phrasing where it says that adding one person to a team of 2 adds not only 50% more workforce, but also 50% more communication. All right, thank you.